You're watching a replay of Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres. For more videos just like this, hit that red subscribe button.
Good morning. You're listening to Brain Drain on the legendary 1480 WSAR. And I'm Rich Cabaceres, and we got an interesting show today. We're going to talk about voting. And really the question is, does your vote matter? So I want to hear from you. Do you believe that your vote matters? Yes, no, why not? And let's find some concrete evidence that it does and does not matter. And then let's come together at the end of the show and figure out whether it does or does not. So let me kick off the conversation by stating a couple of things. First, I want to make sure that whoever you are who's listening or watching right now, I want you to have the opportunity to call in. 508-673-1480, where you can hear your voice, whether it be on WSAR.com, Spindle City Auto Glass Studio Cam, whether it be over Facebook Live, where you want to comment below, but you can also hear your own voice here on these airwaves. But also, you can listen to us anywhere in the world by going to the TuneIn Radio app and downloading it for absolutely free in your app store on your cell phone, and typing in 1480 WSAR, and my voice comes to you live in your ears 9 to 11 a.m., Monday through Thursday, Eastern Standard Time. So that's right, it's Wednesday, meaning you have one more day of me in this week. But for the next 2 hours, we're going to be talking about whether your vote matters. Do you believe that it matters? Do you believe that it doesn't matter? And let's talk about some situations and why this conversation I think is important at this point. So first, I think it's important to understand what's happening right now in politics. And what we tend to do is we tend to victim blame, right? So victim blaming, we've all decided, is bad. But whenever something doesn't happen, people blame it on the voters, and specifically the people who don't vote. Well, maybe we need to start taking responsibility for why people aren't voting. Because the people who are getting elected to office are people who are taking advantage of the slim votes. So think about this for a second. Right now, you're seeing voting percentages that go down into the teens in some places. And you have to ask yourself why. And a lot of it is because those politicians are doing very little to reach out to the masses. If you feel otherwise, please let me know, because I want to hear your opinion. Again, 508-673-1480. But think about it this way. If they know who's going to vote for them, what incentive do they have to go and talk to people who have never voted before? Look at the way that politicians get elected, right? They have these compounded lists based on who is more likely to vote for them. And in those lists are people who historically have voted multiple times and historically voted for their party or for people who are like them or something along those lines. But you know who's missing from those lists? People who are in their 20s, people who are in their 30s, people who have never voted for before for whatever reason, or people who have voted maybe once, then taken a time off and then voted again. So what we tend to do in this country is we tend to make people feel bad because they didn't vote. We tend to say, you're evil because you didn't vote. But we don't try to understand why people aren't voting. And here's one thing that I've heard on a regular basis. My vote doesn't count. So let's start dissecting that. Does somebody's vote actually count? The other thing that I hear a lot is I don't know enough in order to make an informed vote. And whose fault is that? I don't think it's the person's fault. I think what's happening is people are not getting the information because we're using old means to appeal to new people, right? If you look at who covers the news, the political runs the most, it's old media platforms, right? You see it majority in newspapers, you see it majority in radio, but you don't see a lot of it on the internet, right? And the stuff that is on the internet, you don't know if it's true or not. So how difficult is it for you who just turned 18 years old and you're able to vote to actually make your vote count and actually cast an informed vote? It's more difficult today than it was 40 years ago, 50 years ago when the internet didn't exist, when cable TV didn't exist. It's a lot harder today, and we have to take that into perspective on why people are not voting. let's kind of dive into the conversation. So first, I think it's important that we talk about the national side of politics, right? And we have to talk about the Electoral College. And there's no better indication of what happens in the Electoral College than what's happened over the previous 20 years. And yeah, let's talk about that just a little bit. So first, look at the last election, right? The popular vote went for Hillary Clinton. Whether you liked Hillary, whether you didn't like Hillary Clinton, the popular vote went to Hillary Clinton. And because of the Electoral College, Donald Trump was elected to office. Now, he won fair and square because the Electoral College is the way that people get elected to President of the United States, right? And there's the opportunity to change that, and it hasn't been changed since the inception of this country. So the popular vote is not going to vote for the President of the United States, and we've proven that not only this time, but we've proven that 20 years ago, or almost 20 years ago with George Bush. So ask yourself the question, does your vote matter? The Electoral College. Think about this for a second. The President of the United States is supposed to represent the people of the United States, yet they are not elected by the people of the United States. Is that contradictory or is it not? So when somebody says to you, my vote doesn't count, that's a very fair point, right? And then we can even go back in the same election and look at the Democratic National Convention, right? You had people who were going to the Democratic National Convention as delegates, but they were going as delegates already committed to a particular candidate. So they didn't care about how the vote turned out. They were voting for their person regardless if they liked it or not. So these conventions are really what's controlling who is getting elected and who isn't getting elected, right? So look at the Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton thing. A lot of people, especially young people, wanted somebody like Bernie Sanders to run for president of the United States against Donald Trump. But the system is set up in such a way where it's difficult for somebody who's a long shot to actually win, even though they're not a long shot within their own party. So you have people who get elected, and you have these people who have more power with their votes than other people, who are ultimately picking, and I'm really trying to dumb this down so it's easily understandable, but they're called superdelegates, and they have this ability to kind of pick who their next candidate for the party is. Not the people who are part of the party going to the polls and stuff like that, but the people who are pushed in representing somebody before they already have a bias before the vote even comes in. So think about this for a second. We had somebody here in Fall River saying, you know what, I'm going to be a delegate for Bernie Sanders before a vote even came out. Is that fair? Is that representing the people that put you into the convention? Or should you be going off of the popular vote in the district that you're supporting? I think it's a real good question. Because we talk about people and we say your vote counts, but every single opportunity that we have to take the power of somebody's vote away, do you think that we're doing it? I also wanted to add to the conversation that delegates are supposed to vote for candidates who receive the most votes but are not obligated to. And that was posted by somebody on Facebook Live. And, you know, at the end of the day, that's exactly what delegates are supposed to do. They're supposed to vote for what the popular vote does in their region. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen. What happens is somebody says, well, I am running to support this specific person. And does that benefit the people that they're supposed to represent, even in their own party? I don't think so. So we have to ask, is the way that people get elected even to their own party proper, right? So what do you think? 508-673-1480. And there are other examples of this. There are other examples like gerrymandering, right? So we talk about what happens at the federal level and how congressmen and senators, or not senators because there's two per state, but congressmen get elected to office and hold their seats. And if you don't know anything about gerrymandering, let me basically describe what happens. So at the state level, the state folks, whoever is the dominant part, or the state folks have the opportunity to redraw maps based on population. And what happens is you see these crazy districts that look like salamanders in some places and have these weird shapes to get the proper amount of people necessary to represent a region. And here's the interesting part about it. if you are the controlled party or you're the controlling party of a state, you can control who is voting for people at the congressional level. You can control the districts. At the state level, the districts are controlled slightly. So ask you, because the districts get redrawn every 10 years. So ask yourself this question. If you're the controlling party, would you want to set up a situation for somebody who isn't part of your party to get reelected or to get elected to office? So these districts get drawn and redrawn to make sure that if you're in a Democratic state, that a Democrat gets elected. If you're in a Republican state, a Republican gets elected. So there's another example of, does your vote matter? If you're in this district, and every district can be gerrymandered in some way, shape, or form. If you're in this district, they're making it so the popular party gets elected. How does that make sense? All that's doing is it's taking away the power of each individual's vote. If you really think about it, the best and fairest system of who should be elected to office, you see it in the governor and you see it in the entire state level, right? How many places are Democratic controlled but have a Republican governor? Massachusetts is. How many people are Republican controlled and have a Democratic governor? It happens. And there's a reason for that, because majority of the people in the state might want the other party. Majority of the people in the state don't relate to the Democratic and the Republican side, but they have to pick a side. And that's part of the problem in and of itself, right? If you didn't have to pick the Democratic or the Republican side and you had to just pick the best candidate, do you think elections would turn out a little bit different? So I think it's important to kind of dive in and talk about each and every one of these topics and decide whether your vote matters or it doesn't matter. And folks who say that your vote does matter and it's because of slim margins, they're right. Right? There are people who have won elections based on a coin toss because the vote was tied. There are people who've had to challenge votes because it's within 7 votes or 6 votes or 5 votes. And you know where that happens majority of the time? That happens at the local level, because the local level is manipulated the least. Now, granted, at the local level, people tend to vote not based on who they like, but based on who they hate. So they say, I don't like this guy, I don't like this guy, I don't like this girl. I am going to vote for everybody who isn't this person. Or, you know what, the council needs a clean sweep, the selectmen need a clean sweep, I'm going to vote for everybody who is not that person. And it's funny because I've actually heard people right after the most recent election saying that the council needs a clean sweep or this group needs a clean sweep. So maybe they're never happy because there are new people there, and there are always new people, or majority of the time there's new people who are elected. So maybe some people just are never satisfied. That being said, the local elections are manipulated in such a way where people are told misinformation, and it's very difficult to disseminate information to people in masses because a lot of local elections don't have the funding to get to every single person who they represent. So what happens is they have this list who only caters to people who have shown to vote over and over and over again. So how are they appealing to the new people who are voting? Because eventually the voting generation, the people who feel like it's your duty to vote, which I believe it is your duty to vote, but that generation is going to die off. Right? At some point in time, you're not going to live to 170, 180, 190 years old, and we need to do more to make sure people are voting. Otherwise, the numbers are going to continue to decrease. So, what are we doing to make sure that politics is palatable? And the number one comment that people make is, does my vote matter? And they have a real good question there. Does their vote matter? So, before we go to the break, I also want to talk about the mainstream media. And we saw how important the mainstream media was in the most recent election, right? And if you look at the Republican race and you say, okay, there are 4 people left. At the point where there were 4 people left, or we can go even further back than that, they had popular stage, and they had an unpopular stage. And they said the people in the unpopular stage, they were going to get relegated to a different time. They weren't going to be able to talk to some of the more popular candidates. Is that fair? Right? And then you have the other side, which is you had 4 candidates on the stage, and the media would zoom in to those who would call each other liars, call each other every name in the book. And meanwhile, so who was left? It was Donald Trump, it was Ted Cruz, it was Marco Rubio, and it was John Kasich. And the media would purposely place the stage in such a way where they could zoom in and get the 3 people who are calling each other liars and cheats and every name in the book. Meanwhile, you had a guy like John Kasich standing off to the side and talking almost presidential, and not getting any coverage because he wasn't playing into the filth. So, what does the mainstream media, what is their purpose in elections? What is their purpose? Because I can tell you right now, it seems based on the way that the coverage was, is their purpose was to make more money for themselves, because they didn't cover everybody equally. John Kasich is a prime example of that. They didn't cover everybody equally because they were more worried about the gossip. So, you know what? When I vote for president or when I vote for governor, I don't vote based on the way they look on a reality TV show. I vote based on their policies and the things that they want to get done. And we heard very little of that during the debates, at least for Republican president. We heard very, very little of that. What we heard is, this person isn't really going to do what they're saying they're going to do. This person is a liar. This person has never got anything done. We heard all the negative things about every other candidate, but we never heard what somebody was actually going to do, except for one person, and that was John Kasich. And you know what they did to him because of that? They put him off into the corner, and they zoomed in on the other 3 candidates. So, how is the mainstream media playing into these elections? Because the way that they're doing it right now, the more popular person is going to get elected, not based on policy, but based on their popularity and what they say. And that's why I say that if the Democrats were smart, they'd get somebody like George Clooney, they'd get somebody like Oprah Winfrey to run for office, because they'll probably beat somebody like Donald Trump, because their celebrity status is greater, regardless of their policy. Because if you really think about it, call in. Tell me a celebrity who lost an election. Tell me a celebrity who lost a state election, a city election. Tell me a celebrity who lost a federal election even. They come few and far between. And there's a reason for that, because the vote is based on popular votes. So, of course, people who aren't paying attention to politics because they don't know what to believe, and they're not paying attention to the slander that's happening in the mainstream media, they're going to vote for somebody they know. And that person might be in Ocean's 11. Or that person might be giving away free stuff, new cars, every single time they have a TV show. So we ask ourselves the question, why are people, or even the better candidates, not being elected to office, or the more popular candidates not being elected to office? Because the system is working against it. So does your vote matter? 80. And we are talking about whether your vote matters. So let us know. Do you think your vote matters? Do you think your vote doesn't matter? This is an important conversation that I think we have to have, because if we don't, then the same thing is going to happen over and over and over again with very little result. Voter turnouts are going to continue to decrease, and not much is going to change. So I want to go straight to a comment on Facebook. It says, gerrymandering leads to more divisions in our country. A candidate doesn't have to legislate towards the middle. They can cater to the extreme right or left and still get elected. The result becomes apparent when you look at the federal level and how they can't get anything done or agree on anything. You know, that's a great, great point. And I want to continue hearing those points. Whether you agree, whether you disagree, I want to hear your points. Because the only way we can have a proper discussion about this is from hearing from you. And as you know, callers, you drive this show. So I want to hear you have the opportunity to let your voice be heard. So, back to the conversation. We're talking about gerrymandering and how that worked. We talked about the mainstream media and how that's affecting elections. We talked about the national conventions and how they're manipulating the elections to get their favorite candidate, or the candidate of the party, as opposed to the candidate of the majority of the people of their party, which, if that makes sense. What I mean by that is the power players of the party get their person in, as opposed to the majority of the people who call themselves a Democrat or a Republican. We also talked about the Electoral College. But before we continue the conversation, I want to let you know about a huge opportunity that you have, and I'm saying that in my best Donald Trump impression ever. Huge opportunity. And that huge opportunity is you can get over to Sabre TV in Fall River, Massachusetts on Pleasant Street. Because if you're looking for a great deal on your next TV before the Super Bowl, you might want to visit them, 804 Pleasant Street in Fall River, for the best deals in the South Coast. You can get an 82-inch Samsung 4K TV for $3,000. That's bigger than me. 82 inches. So Best Buy is selling the same TV for $3,500. So why go to the big box store and spend more money when you can go to my friends over at Sabre TV on Pleasant Street in Fall River and get discounts compared to the big box store? They haven't been in business for the last 35 years just because they've just been there. They know how to keep prices low because they keep their overhead low. They own the building. So you need to get over there. You need to see them. But if you think that 82 inches is too big for your place, well, how about you get the TV that's rated the best TV ever, the LG OLED TV. You can get a 65-inch LG OLED TV for $2,500 or a 55-inch for $1,500, again beating the big box stores. So if you want to make a splash during the Super Bowl, but you don't have the cash on you, how about you talk to them because they have 0% financing. Large or small, Sabre TV has it all. Go check them out, and we're going to continue the conversation. Now, the local elections, when you look at how they all work, and you look at what happened at the state level, because, again, the constant push is your vote matters, but there needs to be some convincing. So what about the marijuana votes? What about the states that are voting yes to marijuana? In popular state elections, the popular group, the people of those states are saying yes, by popular vote, we want to use marijuana in some way, shape, or form. Whether it be for medicinal purposes, whether it be for recreational purposes, a lot of states have approved marijuana in some way, shape, or form. Now what's happened? You have the Justice Department saying we're going to start enforcing this. Basically the discretion is on the U.S. Attorney in the area. So if you've been using marijuana that you voted for and your state has approved, whether it be for recreational or medicinal purposes, by popular vote, now the federal government wants to take that away. Now the federal government is saying, even though in polls it's showing that marijuana is becoming more and more accepted by by a large margin, by popular vote, the federal government is saying, and specifically the Justice Department is saying, we don't want marijuana to happen, and we're going to start enforcing it if the U.S. Attorney, and talk about passing the buck, at the U.S. Attorney's discretion. So, is that okay, right? Because isn't government supposed to represent the people? Think about this. Your government is in place to be a government by the people, for the people. Yet, they do what they want. And marijuana is a clear indication of that. If they start enforcing federal marijuana laws in the various states that voted to approve it, who are they representing? They're representing themselves. So does your vote matter? Because marijuana had a sweeping vote, and not only that, people by the thousands, by the hundreds of thousands, by the millions, voted for marijuana. And a lot of times when the state passed, or the people passed that they wanted to vote marijuana in some way, shape, or form, the state held on to it longer. And they tried to manipulate it in a way where they can get some, but they can't get others. And they say it's in the name of safety. And is it? Is this the type of thing where people are getting their voice heard? Do you think that your local, your state, your federal officials represent you and your opinions? That's a very, very, very tough question. And I'd argue there's no clearer indication of that than the fact that Congress was able to insider trade during the Great Recession, right? So when you look at what happens when it comes to uh, trading in the stock market, trading in the bond market. Congress has insider information. And if you use insider information to purchase a stock or a bond, you're breaking the law. Unless you're a congressman or a senator, then you are not breaking the law. How is that fair? How is it fair that people go into office in Congress and they're not millionaires, but they walk out millionaires? How is it that they can practice certain things and you can't? Is it the whole do as I say, not as I do thing? And this is something, and this philosophy is something that permeates in politics. This is something that happens all across the board where people are making decisions not based on who you are and who they represent, but based on what they feel, what benefits them. We have somebody on Facebook who just commented, every single vote counts in Fall River. The issue is voter turnout. In one election, this city could achieve phenomenal gains by having more than 16,000 out 83,000 votes voting. And I apologize, the grammar's kind of breaking up to me. But yeah, you're right. In the city of Fall River, Massachusetts, if voter turnout were greater than 30%, he meant change. Phenomenal change by having more than 16,000 people. And you know what? You're right. But part of the issue is I think the onus is on the politician. The onus is on the politician to tell the average person not only that they need to get out there and vote, but why to vote for them with unbiased information. I think it's also on the media to say, hey, this is the unbiased information and report fairly. I think that's part of the problem, right? Because we have this situation where information is filtered before it gets to the people. So is that fair? Is it informing the people truthfully? And what are we doing to close that gap? The argument is nothing, because we still run campaigns the same way. The campaigns are run, we're going to go after the people who vote all the time, as opposed to going after the people who have never voted before. We'll leave them in the dark. And even think about the process of going to vote. Right, you walk into a place that you've probably never been before. You walk in and you don't know what table to go to. And it's not really the most warm and fuzzy situation when you walk into a voting poll, right? Unless you know somebody there, people kind of look at you if they're not busy, and they wonder where you're going to go next. And if you don't know what portion of the polls you're supposed to vote in, you might walk up to the wrong table, which makes the process longer. There isn't like a meet and greet. There isn't a place where you could sit down, have some coffee and donuts. It's just like go in, get out, and you're treated almost like cattle. I can remember being treated like that once, and it was the military. But I signed up for that. So, yeah, do we need to do more to make young people and people who have never voted before have an incentive to vote? And that doesn't mean we have to give them stuff. I don't think that somebody should have to be bribed to vote. But what I do think is there needs to be some type of story on what we can say on how a vote matters, other than, well, if it gets down to 7 votes, 8 votes, then your vote would have mattered. That's happened before, right? We had that happen actually in Fall River, Massachusetts, with the state representative race maybe 4 years ago. One state representative won by a few votes. So, at that point in time, yes, the vote would have mattered. But those happen very, very sparingly. So, does your vote matter? I mean, let's get back into the conversation. If you want to join the conversation again, if you're sitting in your car and you're waiting for it to warm up, if you're at work and you don't want your boss to hear you, you might want to use your superhero rasp. And, we've talked about that in the past, and it kind of sounds something like this. So, get that superhero rasp working. Call into the show, 508-673-1480, because I know you have an opinion, And obviously I've kind of stated a little bit on where I'm leaning on this. We need to do more to get young people to vote. And it's not even the young people. There are people in their 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s who have lost faith in the process. They believe that the process is rigged and the process is not designed to get the best person elected. If you feel that way, call in and tell me why. I've had people on this air, on this show, say exactly that. Say, hey, I'm so discouraged that I don't think I'm ever going to vote again. So let's hear what you have to say. Call, you're live on 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Pretty good. You couldn't come up with a more difficult subject, I don't believe, if you really think about it.
Go for it. Well, that's what we do here. On Brain Drain, we talk about the topics that people are afraid to talk about.
Yeah, you're doing great. Everybody's vote counts, and it matters. No matter if you win overwhelmingly, or if you lose overwhelmingly, or if it's by the neck win.
Now, why do you feel that way, caller?
Well, because it's true. Let's say, take a glass of water. You put one drop in. You say, well, that one drop don't matter. But then eventually you can fill the glass up by putting one drop in. And so then every drop matters and counts.
Caller, that's a lot of wisdom in that statement.
But, take the atoms in a human body. It's 10 to the 28th power, if I remember right, and I've forgotten how many trillions of that is, but every atom counts.
Caller,
even though you might take one individual atom, so that doesn't mean anything.
So how do you think that we get more people to get out and vote? Well, who do you think's fault it is? Do you think it's on the individual person? Do you think that it's on politicians? Do you think it's on the media? Do you think it's all of the above?
Possibly all of the above. It's a very complex. Again, it's very complex. Every individual is different. We had a vote here, for instance, for a new high school. I'm retired. I'm 84 years old, and I know we need a new high school. But I thought we were spending too much money on this high school and making another Taj Mahal. So I went over. I knew that the vote was going to be to approve the new high school and the money for it. But I went over and I voted against it, even though I knew that my vote was not going to be the winning vote. But I feel my vote still counted because I have the opportunity to vote. I'm living in the United States of America. We have the freedom to vote. So that's one of the things that we are forgetting about, that we have the freedom to vote in this country. But our country is from 1789 under this Constitution, and that's 200 and some years.
Right.
We've lived under the freedom to vote. Before that, there was not a nation in the world that had a written constitution, and the people had the right to go out and vote. And there's still, across the world today, there's nations after nation after nation that the people can't go out and vote their freedom of thought or what they want.
Caller, you made some very great points. You've made some very wise statements. I appreciate the call. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a great day. Call, you live on 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Richard. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. I think people get disgusted because not on a local level so much, but on the federal level, and sometimes the state level, their elected representatives don't really want to listen to what you've got to say.
I think that's fair.
And you're not, quote unquote, in the inner circle. Kip O'Neill said every vote counts, and all politics is local. And I want to give you an example, and it has nothing to do with elected officials.
Sure.
But here in Somerset, we have a brand new high school, and a track was supposed to be open to the public. And last year it was, no problem. Well, I went to utilize the track Saturday, and there's a little posting, track closed for the winter. Use the outside sidewalk that surrounds the track. Now, if it's a safety issue, the walkway around the track is only maybe no more than 1.5 lanes. The track has 8 lanes, so if you have multiple people on there, people running and walking, there's plenty of room. So I walked around the outside circle. I did my 3 miles. So I called Tuesday. I called the superintendent's office, and the secretary was very nice, and she got back to me. The superintendent said, I'll call the athletic director because he's the one that's in charge of running athletics at the school, and he made the decision to close the track. Now I'm thinking, gee, I guess he doesn't have to follow a chain of command. He can arbitrarily just close the track without consulting the principal or the superintendent of schools, knowing that it's supposed to be open to the public.
Well, the good thing about this show and the airwaves is I'm sure that there are selectmen who are listening right now who would probably want to approach
Well, maybe
this.
someone from the school committee. So I phoned the athletic director. I left a message. I haven't heard yet. I know it was only yesterday. But, I said, arbitrarily, you close the track.
Caller, I think that it's important that we remember that the people who run this country are the people of the United States, or should be.
Well, and I'm waiting for a return call. And if he tells me it's a safety issue, I say, well, that doesn't wash because you're taking eight lanes and making it into two. It just makes no sense.
Caller,
people become empowered and don't care about the little guy.
Caller, thank you so much for letting us know about a story that you've had. Have a great day.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Caller, you're live on 1480 WSA. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
What is the topic of today?
We are talking about voting, and do you believe that your vote matters, and what can we do to get more people to vote?
People just have to realize that it's part of their civic duty. We should just do it.
See, but the thing
Doesn't take that long, for God's sake.
But one of my concerns is if we just assume that people are going to perform their civic duty, unfortunately, they haven't done so. And there's multiple reasons for that. And one of the main reasons why people use as an excuse on why they don't vote is they believe that their vote doesn't matter. And there's a bunch of examples on why they could be correct on that. We talked about the Electoral College. We talked about the national conventions for the Democratic and the Republican Party. We talked about gerrymandering, mainstream media, and how all those organizations are working against people's votes actually counting.
I don't know. Don't they investigate these things if they think there's fraud? Have they ever proven that there was?
Well, voter fraud is something different.
What was the action that they took if they found any?
Right, and voter fraud is something different, and there's very few cases of actual voter fraud. But the Electoral College takes the power away from the people and puts it on delegates and superdelegates.
I think that the Electoral College is good because for the states that might be bigger and have fewer people, they're not going to be dictated. It's more fair than having it being dictated by maybe a more dense population in a city.
Okay.
I mean, like in a bigger state with more cities.
And even with the conventions, right, we saw in the Democratic National Convention, and locally, people were going and saying, I am going to go there and I'm going to vote for Bernie regardless of what the people in my area say they're going to do. So the Democratic and the Republican National Conventions are not voting the way that the popular vote is going like they're supposed to do. They're voting the way that they feel. And gerrymandered districts, right, where you have these...
Well, isn't that why we have I can't say the word. The one we have in September before the election...
You're talking about the primary vote.
Primary, that's the one.
So the primary vote...
Well, at that time, you can have more than one candidate on for each party.
That's right.
And then you could pick who you want.
And then
so I guess that's what people have to decide at that point, who they want.
But here's the interesting part about that. In a lot of states, even though the people vote, they don't actually choose who the candidate is. It's usually these conventions that choose who the candidate is.
Yeah,
so
but maybe the candidate could just run as an independent, could they not?
Yes, they could.
Or have they declared their party, they have to stay within it.
And you know what? You bring up a great example about running as an independent. And the thing about running as an independent is how do you beat the machines of the Democratic and the Republican Party, because they're raising tons and tons and tons and tons of money to make sure that it's a bipartisan election instead of having a third independent candidate.
But at the beginning, aren't they helping all the candidates, party, whatever party they belong to? Don't they happen to help all the candidates that are running?
No. So ultimately, the way it works, if you're within the Republican Party and you're running against other Republican candidates, you would have to go out and fundraise with as just yourself. And unless you have a lot of support in the Republican Party, usually they don't throw their funding behind you until they've actually chosen who the candidate is.
It's because it's so expensive with all the advertising you have to do to get your name out there.
Which is great for the economy.
Unless, of course, you actually spent a lot of time touring to get your name out there in that respect.
And that costs money, too. Because you're
that
not.
costs money too, but you'd have to be really dedicated to it.
Well, think about it this way.
A small budget.
Well, think about it this way. In order to get to everywhere that you need to be, you're probably not working, right? Because you don't have the you don't have the ability to work because your job is meeting as many people as possible. So you're losing money that way, and you're losing money because you're spending money on advertising, plane tickets, bus tickets, gas, all the other stuff necessary, print
Rentals,
ads.
yeah, oh yeah.
You got it. So, caller, I think you're right. Every vote does count, but what are we doing to make sure that that the popular vote is what's deciding elections? And I think all these different things that I've just stated are taking the power away from the people as opposed to giving it to them.
I don't know. I just hope they don't have to shut down because that's a big waste of money. You're still paying the people that aren't going to work anyway.
The government shutdown? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You know, they should be, these people that are representing us there obviously can get the job done. That's why they're going to close down the government. They should all grow up and come up with some kind of compromise. I listened to the president when he had the different members there, and he said he was willing to sign something for them to hash it out. They know what the president wants. They know what they want. There's going to be some midpoint there.
Caller, thank you so much for your call. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Call you live on 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Morning.
How you doing?
Lousy. You?
I'm doing a lot better than you, I guess. What's going on?
You know, if people want to hear what a constitutionalist sounds like, Sheriff Richard Mack is running for congressman of Arizona, and pay attention to what he's got to say compared to all the others, and you'll see the difference. That's basically all I have.
Okay, so we're talking about voting. Do you think that your vote matters?
No.
And why do you feel that way?
Because of the Electoral College.
So
it's not even constitutional.
Now, do you still vote?
No.
All right. So, I've made the argument, and I've made this argument a lot, is your vote does matter. But, in my opinion, you have a larger voice than you think. And the best way to do that is by casting a blank ballot. If you think that all the candidates are horrible, if you think nobody represents you, you know what you do? You cast a ballot for no one, and your vote still counts.
Okay, this is what I got to say about that. Are you a United States citizen?
I am.
You are, and you're proud to be?
I am.
Now go look at all the modern dictionaries and see what a United States citizen is.
Okay.
Go look at the law dictionaries, not the regular dictionaries. Go look at what the law dictionary says about a United States citizen.
Okay.
It's not what you think it is.
All right. What? Give me the Cliff Notes on, because I'm sure you've actually looked at it. So, give me the Cliff Notes on what it is.
Well, basically, they consider us a person, and then if you go look up what a person is a subcorporation of the United States of America.
So, and corporations are also called a person too.
Living flesh and blood. They consider us as corporations, and they can do whatever they like with corporations. And it gets further and further down a rabbit hole. You'd have to study it. But a good introduction would be Meet Your Straw Man. Watch that on YouTube.
Caller, thank you so much for your points. Thank you for the information that you shared. And I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Keep listening to the show. Call you live in 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Rich.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Something interesting. Right now on TV, Jeff Flake is talking from the floor of the Senate and criticizing Trump.
Okay.
But you voted with Trump. Who are you kidding? Do you think Trump might care if you didn't vote with him, but you got bullied down and you voted with him?
So are you saying partisan politics is bad?
Yeah. If you don't believe in something, but you vote with it because of the influence of the party, and then you I don't even know what the right word is, clownish enough to stand up there and criticize, what do you say?
Now, caller, wait 1 second. I just want to clarify this. Are you saying that partisan politics is bad?
Yes.
Hold on 1 second. We agree on something.
Oh, there you go. And when we're talking about the Electoral College, you had a caller who defended the Electoral College, and I think the comments were about the big cities. She said, well, does a city vote for a president? Does a plot of land vote for a president? Or does a person vote for a president? Well, if it's a person, then of course the big cities will have more say because there are more people.
Well, not only that, now with Citizens United, corporations have more say than anybody.
Well, there you go, because you can't, with the exception of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was really, whether you liked his politics or not, was a grassroots candidate.
Except grassroots candidacy didn't win.
It did win, and also, and I can almost understand the Democratic Party view of him, because he wasn't a Democrat.
Right.
But he latched onto the party to get its power. And I'll be fair with it. Another problem with the Electoral College, as we're adding more things to the stew, is that if there's there is an order of states voting, well, if your state is far down the line, a candidate you're interested in might not even be there anymore.
You're right.
Another thing in terms of the Electoral College, and I'm firm believer, it is not out of the realm of possibility that electronic voting can be hacked. It is easier to hack an electoral system than a popular system.
Caller, I got to play it one more time. Hold on.
Sure.
Take that with your beard.
Caller. I am humbled and honored. One last thought, though. When we looked at the role of the media, I agree with you. It's not so much that the media is biased. Yeah, CNN is biased towards the Democrats. Fox is biased towards the conservatives. Who's surprised?
And that's part of the problem.
All they're doing this for is ratings.
Right.
And attention. And Trump played that like a fine fiddle.
Caller.
From the moment he went down the escalator, where he was surrounded by people applauding him, they were his own employees and paid to be there, but it didn't make a difference anymore.
Caller, I hope that tomorrow you call in and make some of these very same points, because you are
last idea.
Sure.
I've come up with the idea, I've said it before, of the created candidate. The person in the media age who so perfectly molds themselves to what a group of people want that they can't break away from him. He is them. You know who the first modern person was to do that? Who was the first? I could almost do it as a quiz question, but I won't.
Yeah, please don't.
My red pen out. Who was the first modern person to have a media background? Not Donald Trump.
Ronald Reagan.
No.
Who?
Sarah Palin.
Oh, okay.
Was trained in media. So you had this person from Wasilla, Alaska, which is the size of a town, in her first term as governor. I don't know why John McCain picked her, but she had a perfect compone to what some people wanted to hear.
All right, and caller, I do have to hold you there because we have other callers on the line. Thank you so much. And yeah, I got to say, you kind of hit the nail, at least in my opinion, on the head so many times when you spoke today. It was crazy. So you can disagree with me, though. I want you to disagree with me. If you have opinions, I want to hear them. You have the ability to change my mind. 508-673-1480, or you can join the conversation on Facebook. Call you live on 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
How are you doing today?
Hey, you think your vote counts? Of course they count your vote.
They count.
It's what they do with it later.
Right. Because look at the Democratic National Convention, look at the Electoral College, look at gerrymandering. All these things are done to...
I mean, I was watching my governor last night smile away today, but she threw my vote away.
And your governor is, and you live in Rhode Island, so you're Gina Raimondo.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't care what you do for me. I don't care if you gave me $1 million. You threw my vote away.
Wow. And it's funny because...
The whole state went for Bernie, man. And I can understand if you're a Democrat and the state went for Trump. Then it's a little different. But, he was running as a Democrat, so...
And, it's funny because actually...
I'll tell you what, I don't even feel like voting any longer unless it's a local election.
So I actually have a comment from Jim DuPont, who has Right Thoughts at 3 o'clock here on 1480 WSAR. And he said, if you want to abolish the Electoral College, then abolish the U.S. Senate as it's based on the same principle. And I think it's a fair point. I think it's a very, very fair point. But at the end of the day, we have to decide. We, the people, are supposed to be the people who...
Well, we the people, man. Yeah, I mean, you voted for marijuana in the state of Massachusetts, but you're gonna, now they're saying that they're gonna lock up people for it.
Can you imagine that? Think about how many people...
I can't imagine it, but that's what they'll do.
Think about how many people are serving prison or have served prison sentences or mandatory minimum sentences because of the war on drugs for something. Because marijuana is considered a drug that's comparable to heroin and cocaine. Think about this for a second.
Oh, listen, some people feel it's a gateway. I mean, pack of cigarettes ain't a gateway.
Yeah, a pack of cigarettes aren't a gateway. Alcohol isn't a gateway.
Jack Daniels ain't a gateway.
Right.
Or beer. I don't know. An aspirin.
Right.
I mean, even an aspirin's for anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, the difference between marijuana and, let's say, heroin is marijuana is not legalized by the federal government.
Yeah, as far as addiction, if it's addictive, it's not. I can tell you that one.
Caller, thank you so much for your call. Thank you for your opinions, and thank you for the Rhode Island perspective. And you know what? If you're in another state,
I love when she smiles. She has a great smile.
And I want to hear from you.
She's probably a great person. Just made a lousy mistake, man.
Well,
the state went for Bernie. Support your state. That's what you're there for. To support the people.
Caller, thank you so much for your points.
Take care.
Have a great day.
You too.
And he's talking about the way that the National Convention works. And you know what? He's right. People go in and they pledge their support to somebody before the people even vote. Who is that representing? Is it representing the people who will put them into that place? Or is it representing themselves? And, I could even talk about people at the local Fall River level who I know did exactly this. But, that'd be me bashing somebody who I've been pretty much talking about because their lack of spine for an extended period of time, who went to the Democratic National Convention supporting a candidate before even hearing what other people wanted. Let's continue the conversation. We're talking about, does your vote matter? And I know for a fact that there's a lot of elected officials who are listening to this show right now and hearing what you have to say. Because a lot of it is they're making sure that they're representing you. And a lot of their opinions are based on what is said here on the air, whether it be from me or you. So wouldn't you like it to be you? So that being said, we've talked about how votes happen, especially at the federal level and the state level and even the local level. We've talked about the Electoral College and how that is actually taking away the power to the people. We've talked about the national conventions, the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention, and how that's taking away the power of the people. We've talked about gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is something that's kind of been around for a long, long time, and what's done is it's designed to keep the control of the popular party in the state. So they manipulate districts to help their party, taking power away from the people. Mainstream media, pushing their own agenda, pushing for ratings, taking power away from the people. What say you? Call, you're live on 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Rich. How you doing?
Not bad. How are you doing?
Good. When is anybody going to talk about these 50,000 Puerto Ricans that are coming in and that the school districts getting money? They don't have the exact amount. I'm trying to look it up. They don't have the exact amount, but we did take in 15,000 Puerto Ricans from the hurricane this past summer.
So here's a question for you, caller, before you continue. If there were 15,000 people from Arizona, if there were 15,000 people from California...
Oh, no. Don't take this the wrong way. I'm just curious about the money we're getting. And also, I was just going to talk about the demographics, how the demographics have changed, how eventually we're going to have a Spanish mayor, just like how it is in Providence. somebody had talked about that. This ain't going to be no racist thing. I'm just curious of what's going on, how many people we're taking in.
Right.
And people of the community should be notified about this, or should be educated about this. And how is this going to affect our vote? How is this going to affect our vote, and how much money we're going to get for the school districts now?
Now, caller, I hear you, but the only question that I wanted to ask is, if they're from another state who needs refuge, temporary refuge, would we be asking the same question if it were from Rhode Island even, or New York, or from Florida?
Well, we took people in personally. I know we took people in from Louisiana a couple years ago during that other
You're right.
horrible hurricane.
Katrina.
And I know a girl. She's lives up north somewhere, so I know a girl. So I'm just trying to say, who manages this money? How does this money get procreated? And how does this thing go to certain things that we need in the city that gets facilitated?
You know, it's interesting because I think you're bringing up good points about where the proceeds go and who's funding the proceeds. That's information that ultimately, coming off the top of my head, would be a guess. So I'd rather find out the information for you and bring it to you at a later date. But I think it's our obligation to take care of American citizens.
And you know what? Not talking about the Puerto Ricans or Spanish or Colombians or whatever. That I'm not trying to veer off that subject. But I think that, in my own opinion, and a lot of people might take this as coming off as a little funny. But why are we not taking care of our vets first? The people that fought for our freedom, Rich.
Caller, I think that's a fair question.
And it's not racist. I don't mind taking care of people that need to be taken care of. There's using the system and there's abusing the system, Rich. And that's all I'm trying to uncover here, of people that need it to the people that really don't need it.
And caller, you're asking a fair question of where money should go first. I think that's a fair question, and I don't think that it's racist charged or racism charged. So I think it's a fair question, and we're getting close to the end of the show, so I do have to go to the next caller, but thank you for your call.
Thank you, sir.
Have a great day. Call you live in 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm on a highway outside of Oakland, California, listening to you on my car radio.
Perfect. And it's funny because we're actually doing more to reach out to folks in California because we are the morning drive in California. So, hello.
And the reason I'm doing it is because this is the most thoughtful. You and Right Thoughts in the Afternoon and all the other talk shows on WSAR are the most thoughtful, knowledgeable talk shows anywhere on the radio dial, because everyone else is just trying to get listeners, and they're saying the most outrageous, dishonest, crazy stuff to get people to stop and say, what did he say?
Right.
And that does not help democracy.
Well, and to be fair to kind of those folks, the basis of today's show is, does your vote matter? And we're talking about opinions on whether the votes are being diminished or people's power are being diminished. But I think this is the way that you start working towards progress.
And what I would ask all my fellow listeners of WSAR to do is, when you go out today and you shop with people that advertise on WSAR and tell them, I'm here because I heard about you on WSAR. Because if WSAR does better financially and the listenership grows, other people will pay attention and other people will imitate in other parts of the country what you're doing.
Caller, and that's a great point, because we're locally owned and operated. We're not the mainstream media who's charged on political agendas. We are locally owned and operated, so we're relying on people, our sponsors, and people going out and frequenting our sponsors. So you're right. So
and if you go away, the station will be bought by somebody who'll put on Fox News or MSNBC or CNN, some national news outlet, or some music genre you will not want to listen to.
Right. And whether you like my music or don't like my music, the good thing is you only have to deal with it for a minute. My voice, on the other hand, that's something else.
So I would just ask listeners to keep supporting WSR.
Thank you so much for your call, caller. I really, really appreciate it. And continue to spread the word out in the California area. We're sending Facebook Live videos out in that area. We're really, really promoting this being kind of more of a national approach. And we really, really appreciate your support. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Have a great day. And, we're at the end of the show. So, you've been listening to Brain Drain on the legendary 1480 WSAR. I'm Rich Cabaceres.